Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 876 for the 20th of July, 2025. Richard Saunders hosting this week's episode. Coming up, we talk to Dr Eugenie Scott about the 100th anniversary of the famous Scopes monkey trial. This is when the state of Tennessee sued, or was taking to court, John Thomas Scopes for teaching evolution. What are the lessons from a century ago? Find out in part one of this two-part talk with Dr Eugenie Scott. Following that, it's the Australian Skeptics Newsletter, read by Adrienne Hill and written by new news editor D. After that, for crying out loud, it's Kat McLeod, another part one. This is part one of Kat's interviews from the recent lilicon in Edmonton, and this is concerned with the Lilienfeld Alliance for Teaching Rational Skepticism in Higher Education. This week, Kat chats to Dr Christopher Labos, Jonathan Jarry, Sophie Tseng Pellar, and Dr Lynne Honey. Tune in next week for part two and more interviews. Then to round off the show this week, we wander to the TROVE Archives and look for references to Uri Geller from the early days, from 1973. And we have a lengthy story, so guess what? This is part one of a part two series. Lots to pack into this week's episode, so that's enough from me. I'm going to run downstairs, have a nice cup of coffee. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. And joining me now on the line all the way from... Oh, hello. That's a giveaway, isn't it, Jeannie? Not on the line, but in person, it's Eugenie Scott. Hello.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I was telling you I was going to perpetrate a joke on the listeners and pretend that we're, on the other side of the planet, but then your clock would chime.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have... That's, that clock was given to me by my great-grandfather, Eugene Durr, after whom I am named. So that... bong tells you that it's the half hour of some half hour. But we'll let your listeners just be mystified by which half hour we're recording in.
Yes, that's the question. Now, what an interesting time talking about old things, because coming up is the 100th anniversary of Scopes monkey trial.
It is indeed. 2025 is the 100th anniversary. We can count out that far without having to take off our gloves and shoes. 1925 was the date of the original Scopes trial. And what a trial it was. I've actually been doing some speaking about it, although the real granddaddy symposium is going to be later on this month in July, which was, in fact, the month that the Scopes trial was actually held in Dayton, Tennessee, where the temperature was in excess of 90 degrees for 3 weeks and humid. And I certainly am hoping that the celebration of the 100th anniversary of Scopes taking place in Nashville, Dayton, and Chattanooga is not going to be quite the replica of that, because having lived in the Southeast, I kind of know what those summers are like. And there's something to be said for living in coastal California.
It reminds me of those documentaries about the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and everybody's just sweating buckets.
Yeah, they were doing it in Maryland or Washington or one of those places where it gets pretty wet and sticky in the summer. But we digress. Yeah, the Scopes trial itself really was the trial of the century. There's there've been a lot of trials of the century, and perhaps the most recent one is the O.J. Simpson trial, which was covered very, very, very widely. And there were a number of other trials in the 20th and 21st century as well. But if you really want to look at the template of a celebrity trial, so to speak, you really have to go to 1925 in Scopes, because it had celebrity. The defense and the prosecution's key lawyers were Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan, who were the most famous lawyers of their generation, well-known public figures to everyone, and just giants of their time. Clarence Darrow, in fact, has been described by some as one of the three best or the best lawyer of the 20th century. I mean, he was just phenomenal. And both of these men were not only public figures, but very dynamic people as well. William Jennings Bryan had run for president 4 times. He gets kind of a bad rap because he, of course, was the star lawyer for the prosecution against John Scopes for the crime of having taught evolution in the High School of Dayton, Tennessee. And everybody thinks of him as this kind of fundamentalist, Bible-banging kind of caricature, but he really wasn't. He was a much more complex and much more interesting and much more admirable individual. A lot of what we think about the Scopes trial was really conditioned, as it were, by a play and a movie and then later television movies versions called Inherit the Wind.
Yeah, very famous.
Yeah. It's the Spencer Tracy movie is just it's always on everybody's 100 best movies of the 20th century. It's a fabulous movie. The play was excellent. The play was actually about McCarthyism, but they used the kind of the basic outline of the Scopes trial as the author's way of focusing on issues of freedom of speech and freedom of thought. So Inherit the Wind took place in a small town where a brave teacher was accused of teaching evolution and was hauled off to jail at the behest of a fundamentalist minister who couldn't stand the idea of children learning this blasphemous idea. And there he had to wait until the trial, separated from his loved ones and his girlfriend, who, of course, was the daughter of the Bible-pounding minister. Anyway, it was a great dramatic story, but it has very little to do with the actual Inherit the Wind, which in many ways is a much better, equally exciting story. So we've got William Jennings Bryan, who gets a bad rap. He actually was a very progressive politician for his day. He would have fit just fine in Berkeley, quite honestly. Oh, yeah. He was for all kinds of radical ideas like the 8-hour work day. The 5-day work week, payment for overtime, women's suffrage.
Oh, that's too far.
Let's not get ridiculous here. An end to child labor.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he was really a good guy, for the vast majority of his career. I don't know who it was, I forget right now, but some educated fellow said that you're judged by your last innings. And this was the unfortunate case with William Jennings Bryan. People remember the Scopes trial and him being humiliated by Clarence Darrow, who, because of the vagaries of the state's position, Darrow was not allowed to put on expert witnesses. He had a whole stable of scientists and theologians that he was going to bring out to testify that the teaching of evolution was not actually against the Bible, which, of course, was what the Butler Act that Scopes was accused of breaking, of teaching evolution was all about. The Butler Act said you cannot teach any idea that denies the validity of the Bible. And what they were going to argue is that, hey, here are all these Christian theologians, and they say that can be interpreted in any number of ways, so there's no way that Scopes broke the law. It was a clever defense. But so because Darrow couldn't put experts on the stand, he did something that is extremely unusual. He put the opposing lawyer on the stand.
Very famously.
Yes, very famously, which, of course, was portrayed also in Inherit the Wind. And it is this wonderfully dramatic scene. In the play Inherit the Wind and movie Inherit the Wind, if I remember correctly, they actually used some of the transcript of
I seem to recall hearing that, yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, why not?
Well, trials are often very dramatic, so let's use the drama. So Darrow put William Jennings Bryan on the stand, and Bryan just assumed that, that he was smart enough not to get tripped up. But Bryan was kind of started out a couple of feet deep and, couldn't really climb out of the hole that he started out in because right away, Clarence Darrow started asking him about a literal interpretation of the Bible. And, do you think that Joshua stopped the sun during the Battle of Jericho? And of course, Bryan knew better than to answer that yes, because then he'd get the astronomers on his case, because you can't stop the sun. That is, you can only stop the sun if you are in a geocentric universe, and he didn't want to make that mistake. And, similar things kept going, age of the earth sort of thing as well. Fun fact, William Jennings Bryan wasn't actually as much of a fundamentalist as the character in Inherit the Wind, number one, and that he's, remember Last Innings, that he's often pictured as. He was actually an old earth creationist. And at one point, he believed that God created, but, he was okay with the planet, the universe being, hundreds of thousands of years old, which at the time was all that was. They didn't quite know how old it really was, but that was a big deal. And in fact, when he admitted to that under Darrow's questioning, there were gasps in the audience because people didn't know that. Bryan had been on this crusade for several years against the teaching of evolution. Not just because it was because he felt that it was biblically wrong, that it was a bad idea for religion, but also because, like most progressives, he associated evolution, more properly natural selection, with the robber barons, who were the ones promoting child labor and the, work, beat up the workers as long as you want, it doesn't really matter. Andrew Carnegie and the other wealthy industrialists of the time ran these factories and workplaces that just were ghastly by modern standards. Yeah. And they were, most of them were social Darwinists, right? And also, World War I had taken place not that long ago. This was 1925.
Oh, very recently.
Yeah. World War I was ended in like 1919 or 20? 18. Yeah.
So
1918, yeah. So
14-18 war, yeah.
Not very long.
Yeah, only 7 years.
Yeah. And it's hard for us so much longer, and then having had another world war in between, to really appreciate why the Great War, as they called it, was so psychologically devastating. The Germans had, before World War I, had been considered kind of the epitome of Western culture. They had this great music, and they had wonderful science and so forth, and they kind of went wrong in the middle of all this. And there were, of course, there were German atrocities. There were atrocities on the West as well, but the German atrocities were quite memorable. And there was just this shock that culture could have descended so swiftly. What is this? Nature, tooth and claw, etc. And the association of Germans with evolution, which was overstated, but that's what people thought, also helped cement anti-evolution in social progressives like Bryan. So Bryan had, a lot of reasons, not all accurate, to oppose evolution, and he really, because of his status as a political figure of the time, he really did lead the anti-evolution charge, culminating, of course, in the Scopes trial in 1925. Yeah, the trial of the century. It had celebrity. It had big issues like what is the meaning of life, and what is science? It had issues like how much autonomy should teachers have? Do they have the what we would call today academic freedom, and which is a type of free speech in a way? Do they have the free speech academic freedom to teach what they consider to be good scholarship, in this case good science. To what degree can they be coerced into teaching things that they don't want to teach, that they don't believe is true? So there were a lot of freedom of conscience kinds of issues, which of course is exactly what Inherit the Wind was all about. So a lot of these things tie in.
Okay, Eugenie, that's why don't we pick this up and we can have part 2 next week of this interesting talk about the Scopes Monkey trial. But for this week, Eugenie Scott, thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
This is Ben Radford
and Celestia Ward,
coming to you on the Skeptic Zone podcast, one of our favorite skeptical shows.
Back on our podcast, Squaring the Strange, we cover topics like cryptids, ghost stories, and other mysterious phenomena.
If you like tales of the strange and unraveling them to find out the origins, the psychology, and the allure of the weird, well, you might like Squaring the Strange.
New episodes drop twice a month, and our backlog includes folklore, true crime mysteries, psychics, superstitions, conspiracies, panics, urban legends, and more.
Find us on all the popular podcast feeds, and if you like us, subscribe.
No, subscribe first and download like 200 episodes, then decide later if you like us.
Yeah, either way.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill, and I'm back from the Bermuda Triangle to Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada. And I'm going to read the highlights from the Australian Skeptics Newsletter. This is newsletter number 226. Don't forget, you can sign up to this newsletter at skeptics.com.au and get the full report, complete with all the links, every other week, right into your inbox. Now let's see what our new news editor, Dee, has for us this week. Hello to our newsletter subscribers, says Dee. It is with a heavy heart that our quarterly magazine, The Skeptic, has officially ceased publication, and with it, our executive officer and previous newsletter writer, Tim Mendham, retires after 16 years. In positive news, the Australian Skeptics carries on. Monthly Skeptics in the Pub events around Australia and our yearly Skepticon continues as normal, and with big shoes to fill. I take over from Tim for our fortnightly newsletter. In the meantime, read on. Dee. Okay, Dee, I'll do just that, and we'll have to see how much I giggle. Position: Skeptics Online Content Manager. Australian Skeptics is expanding our online presence via a global, content-rich website. We are looking for a person to be our content/editorial manager. All content will take a skeptical, i.e. critical thinking, approach to claims of pseudoscience, the paranormal, and the implications of this approach more broadly. We foresee the position as part-time and would expect the manager to have some understanding of the areas covered by Australian skeptics. The position entails establishing a list of content providers, short and long articles, processing submissions, possibly generating original copy, liaising with website manager and developers for posting on an international site. Please contact nsw@skeptics.com.au for expressions of interest. Measles cases in the U.S. have reached a 33-year high. The United States has not seen a measles epidemic this severe in over 33 years. In 1992, the number of cases was tapering away and had remained in the low hundreds until spiking into the thousands in 2020 and now 2025. Many public health experts warn that this could be a forewarning for other such infections to spread. Also, Liverpool child dies from measles. A child in Liverpool has died in hospital from measles, the second in 5 years to die in the UK, which is too many. There are over 500 cases in England this year, and many are blaming a decline in the MMR vaccination among younger children and adults. It's not great in Canada either. In fact, I went and got my MMR vaccination because I have a grandson who can't get vaccinated until he's a year old. So I want to do whatever I can to protect those who can't get vaccinated for whatever reason. Warrant has been issued by Sydney Police of Chinese blessing scam. $3 million in precious goods, jewelry, and family heirlooms are being stolen by a group who proposes that they would bless these items shipped to them and then ship them back for no charge. However, on the return of the boxes, guess what? They're found to be empty. Vulnerable people in Sydney's Chinese community are being targeted. Former psychic blows the whistle on grounding trend. Grounding? The former medium, Jen Nisa, speaks on the pseudoscientific practice of grounding, which is to walk in the outdoors barefoot in order to receive the healing properties of the earth. Oh, I have heard of that. Not to say that there isn't an emotional benefit to be had, but to imply physical healing is nonsense. I would agree. The same ex-psychic warns people not to fall for occult practices. Otherwise, the devil will get you. Well, and I went to McDonald's this week, and my order number was 666. I wonder what she would say about that. Pentagon Ghostbusters busted. If you have 24 minutes to spare, this is a concise and cutting takedown of, quote, rogue military officials and a few politicians hunting UFOs, ghosts, and monsters, end quote, including guests at the notorious Skinwalker Ranch. This is well worth a look and passing on to those who need to know. Skepticon 2025, call for papers. Skepticon, the Australian Skeptics' annual national convention, will be returning to Melbourne for the 12th time this year on the weekend of October 3rd through 5th. The Victorian Skeptics organisers of the event have announced a call for papers. Keep your eyes on the website for more details as they are announced, including the Friday night social and Saturday night dinner. Special events. New Zealand Skeptics Convention, November 2025. The committee of the New Zealand Skeptics are in the early throes of planning their 2025 convention. It will be held in Christchurch at the end of November, and dates are to be confirmed, but are likely the 28th through 30th. Skeptics in action. If you have any ideas for stories or want to contribute to Skeptics communications, such as our Facebook page or other social medias, or just have something you want to get off your chest, then you're welcome to get in touch. News leads should be sent to newstips@skeptics.com.au. Comments and suggestions should go to editor@skeptics.com.au. Items of interest. Travel tips. Brisbane Creation Discovery Centre, open day. For any of those curious about proponents of creationism or the designed universe, Creation Research is hosting an open day at their museum in Brisbane. We aren't certain of specific details. They are quite cagey with publishing any information online of this open day. But it looks like it's being held on July 19th at 9 Success Street, Acacia Ridge, Brisbane, and the program starts at 2 p.m. until 5 p.m. Ooh, silliest story of the week. Unicorn unearthed at King Arthur's Castle. There's a giggle. Tourists in Cornwall, UK, have said to have discovered the skull of a unicorn, supposedly from the mostly fictitious tale of King Arthur. Doe story of the week. Inflatable UFO generator abducted. A month before the Burien UFO Festival, an inflatable UFO's generator was stolen. Someone deflated their enjoyment. Well, that is all for this week's newsletter. Thank you, Dee, for continuing the tradition of making me giggle. And speaking of giggling, while we were in Bimini, Lara Benham and Richard Saunders were chuckling about the locals' way of pronouncing conch. You know, the sea snail that resides inside conch shells, which were in abundance on the island. As a side note, when we boarded the ship, a bucket at security contained these shells, which were confiscated from people attempting to take them home after finding them on the beaches, and this is strictly prohibited. So how did the locals pronounce conch? Well, they pronounced it conch. And why were Richard and Lara giggling? Because, according to idiomorigins.com and entimonline.com, a conch is an English slang term for a nose, particularly a large one. And it can be traced back as far as 1812, and while the origin of the word is not known, it is surmised that it was derived from the word conch, since some believed the seashell tips resembled noses. Well, then there is the use of conch that I am familiar with, which refers to something suddenly stopping. For example, recently my USB backup battery conked out, causing all the computer equipment attached to it to shut down suddenly. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada.
Don't know whether to move in with your boyfriend. You've asked your friends, consulted your astrologer. She said the moon's in Saturn, so the time is right. Waited for a sign from the universe, but deep down, you still don't know what to do. When decisions feel too hard, we default to feelings, to other people's advice, to your moon's in Saturn, but you're the one who lives with the outcome. What if he says yes, and then you find out he leaves the milk out? Critical thinking gives you clarity. It makes you the author, not the bystander. To start making decisions on your own terms, tune into the Why Smart Women podcast.
For crying out loud, it's Kat McLeod.
This is Kat McLeod coming to you from latitude 53.5-ish in the Northern Hemisphere. On July 10th and 11th, I attended Lilicon, a conference organized by the Lilienfeld Alliance. The alliance is named for Professor Scott Lilienfeld, who promoted skepticism and the idea that skeptics should be more outspoken. The goal of the Alliance and this conference is to connect instructors who teach critical thinking and advocate for courses and course content that promote rational skepticism. This is Kat McLeod coming to you from MacEwan University in Edmonton at the Lilicon Conference. I'm here with Jonathan Jarry and Dr. Chris Labos, as well as Sophie, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of your last name, so you can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Sophie Tseng Pellar.
See, I would have got that wrong. How are you liking the conference so far?
Very much. And we are the unofficial OSS delegation, I guess, because we're all associated with the McGill Office for Science and Society. And did you know that there's a free newsletter that you can subscribe to on our website? Honestly, it's a great conference because these are people who are actually like teaching critical thinking in universities and who are sharing what they've learned, what works, what doesn't work. So I'm really happy to be here.
Chris, you're giving a talk. What's the key takeaway that you want people to have from your talk?
So the main takeaway from my talk is that all the teenagers in your life have been right all along because everything is stupid and nothing matters. The inherent nihilism that governs the universe is something we have to, turn into the skid, essentially. The point.
Canadians understand
that's
that.
Right. Yes, right. If you've never driven on snow and ice, you won't understand what I'm trying to say. I think the major point, and the point I'm going to try to sort of communicate to the audience with the presentation, is that we have to start thinking about science education and critical thinking education to students in the same way that we think about it to the general public. And we tend to have this sort of dividing line, but we kind of forget that students are part of the general public. They are prone to the same biases, and just because they've had introductory level classes in statistics and science doesn't mean they're not going to fall for the same things. Like I know professors in university who own Oura rings, right? Because they want to, but because they don't know, that's not their field of expertise. They see it advertised. It's a wearable device. They've seen wearable devices. They see people have them, and they're like, well, I have disposable income. Let me get it. It looks nice. It looks cool. It, syncs up with their iPhones and gives them data.
For people who don't know, Chris, what is the Oura ring? What does it do?
Not a heck of a lot. It's basically a piece of wearable technology, right? So it's a ring that you wear on your finger, and it's going to feed back biometrics. So like, heart rate and sleep variability, and it's going to tell you if you're sleeping well, and it's going to give you all this data. The problem is a lot of the data is not useful clinically, right? So, but people buy them because it's cool and it's hip and it's a lifestyle thing. And so we forget sometimes that even the best of us are prone to the same thing. So I think the point of the talk is going to be that our science education has to be much more about storytelling and telling people things that we have to be better at communicating in the same way that a lot of the pseudoscientists are good at communicating. The reason why a lot of stuff goes viral is because alternative medicine and all these alternative practitioners, they're very good at telling stories. They're very good at anecdotes. And we need to become better at that, but still infuse it with the data. So I'm going to try, hopefully successfully, to communicate to the audience that that's what we have to start thinking about when we're doing science education, not just to like grade school and high school and lower level education, but even when we get up to university.
I look forward to hearing that. Sophie, as a young woman in the skeptical/critical thinking community now, what takeaways have you had so far? It's only first half of the conference. Or what message do you have for other women like you?
That is a fantastic question. Thank you. I think the biggest takeaway this morning, honestly, wasn't from any of the messaging of the individual talks, but I noticed how compelling it was to sit in the audience of people who, A, are passionate about what they're talking about, and B, who make the effort to go above and beyond to make sure that their audience resonates with their message. So we just watched a talk given by Joe Schwartz, the OSS king. That was so compelling because not only was it full of evidence-based information, but it was also full of stories, full of funny photos and memes. And I was sitting in the audience and I didn't feel an hour and a half fly by as we were listening to him talk about science misinformation. So I think as I venture on into the rest of my life, I'm not a teacher like Chris and Jonathan just yet, but maybe in the future it'll be something that I remember a lot from this experience, how important the delivery of the messages, as well as the validity of the message itself. What would I say to other young women? That's such a good question. I think
you should tell them to buy my book.
Bye, Chris.
You should tell them that when you're a young woman, you will continually be talked over by men who are in the background.
I think it's right now, this is something that I've noticed, is that there's a lot of messaging around female health and people trying to make money off of your health, off of your hormones and your cycle and the fluctuations that may occur in your weight. I would encourage you to dig critically and thoughtfully into the literature. Ask yourself the question, am I buying these products and interacting with this information because it's relevant to my life and these products will make me feel better, or am I just falling victim to marketing packaged in a very lovely package that seems thoughtful of female health? I hope that makes sense.
It does. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I am here with the delightful Dr. Lynne Honey. I loved how you kicked off the conference today and spoke about how so many students come to you because they want to know how to have the difficult conversations about, my parents taught me this and I now know they're wrong, and how you teach them about logical fallacies. Is that the main point, or one of the main points you were hoping to get across with your talk this morning?
Yeah, I think that it's really important to be able to articulate the strategies that we use for combating misinformation or outright falsification. But I also really want people to take away from it that there's a use in terms of teaching, that students get better at learning when they are given the tools to actually think about their own thinking in that way. Or to break down somebody else's logic means that you're able to break down your own logic and make it stronger as a result. So I'm hoping that that's what people took away from what I was talking about.
Well, I definitely got that message. Definitely did. And I'm so glad that there's so many female speakers here as well. That's, I think, something fairly unique to Lilicon. How do you feel being a female in the skeptic world? Do you think that it's getting easier?
I think that much like in a lot of other domains, we benefit from the doors that got kicked down before we got to them. And I've had this experience in a variety of areas in my life. When I was, when I was in high school, I worked in a garage. And so I was surrounded by men. I was the only woman who worked there. And I've always been in male-dominated spaces. The way that I grew up, I kind of expected it. It didn't seem like a big deal to me. My grandparents who raised me were very much, equal opportunity folks, meaning that there are no boys' chores and no girls' chores. Everybody just needs to do chores. Awesome. And so, by the time I'm taking biology classes, by the time I'm, going to grad school in a discipline that it tends to be somewhat male-dominated, I was kind of used to being one of the only women. And it was actually a little surprising to me when I started to not be so alone, and I'm loving it. I love being able to be in a room full of people who, especially the ones who know what it's like to maybe not always feel heard, and you suddenly recognize that, oh my goodness, I just had to make eye contact with her and she totally understood what I meant. So there's something quite refreshing about that. So yeah, it's great. I really don't think that critical thinking is limited by anyone's gender. So I have had wonderful mentors and people I've learned from, male, female. I don't believe any of them identified as non-binary, but whatever. I feel like we can learn from just about anyone, but there is something about if you can see yourself being in a particular role, it makes it more likely that you're going to go for it. And one of the ways that you can see yourself is if the people who are in those roles actually do look like you.
Yeah. Representation is important. So is there any critical thinking nugget of knowledge that you would like to pass on to all the Skeptic Zone listeners? Anything that they should maybe incorporate into their lives if they're not already doing it?
I would say that in a teaching domain, one of the things that I think is most important is to actually model the thinking that we do so that our students can see it. And when I say that, I don't mean just here's the way that I am brilliant, but rather here are the various ways that I've made mistakes, or here are the various ways that I've changed my mind as a result of new information. Because that's the core of scientific thinking, is that the things that we believe, and I don't even like that word, the things that we trust are the result of evaluating the evidence that's in front of us. And we all make mistakes. We all trust things that maybe we shouldn't have trusted.
Even Dr. Pasternak was talking about she made mistakes.
Exactly. We all do, because we're human. And we can talk about the cognitive errors that we're prone to, and the social pressure that has an influence on the way that we believe. But I think that it's really important for students to be able to see that the people who are experts in something, they didn't get there magically. They got there through logical deduction, through trial and error in some cases. And it's not easy, but if we hide the fact that we've made mistakes, it makes them feel less confident in learning from their own mistakes. And I just want everybody to have the opportunity to fail and get better.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's great seeing you again.
Likewise.
This concludes part 1 of my interviews from Lilicon. Tune in next week for more interviews with speakers and conference attendees. Signing off, this is Kat McLeod for Crying Out Loud.
Hi, I'm Leslie Rosenblood, host of Podcast for Inquiry, the official podcast of the Centre for Inquiry Canada. Every 2 weeks, I bring you a conversation with an expert on some complex subject, which we discuss with intelligence and nuance. The goal is that you come away with more than just a surface-level understanding, as well as an appreciation for a genuine spirit of inquiry. If your intellectual curiosity extends to science, religion, philosophy, economics, humanism, politics, and more, subscribe to Podcast for Inquiry today, available anywhere you get your podcasts. A video form is also available on YouTube on the Centre for Inquiry Canada's channel. I look forward to welcoming you to the inquiring community.
Now it's time once again to raid those archives. Yes, we are raiders of the lost archives. They're not lost, they're right there. They're available for just about anybody. Depending, there are many online resources for newspapers at your fingertips. Some of them you need to pay for through firewalls or subscriptions or whatever. And some exist on microfilm and such like, where you run down the stairs and go to your local library, or in my case, the State Library here in Sydney, which has thousands upon thousands of reels of microfilm. You put in these big machines and you scroll through them and you find what you're after, and then you can take screen captures. It's very good. Regardless of where the archives are, we can access them. And this week, following on from the last few weeks, we've been looking at some of the adventures of James the Amazing Randi. This week, we're going to be looking at the flip side of the coin in the classic era of the paranormal, which was the early 1970s. We're going to be looking at an early report here of Uri Geller. And it's so interesting to read reports of Uri Geller when he was sort of just getting started, just breaking into the world of entertainment and so on, to see what people were thinking at the time. Now, in hindsight, of course, it's very different. We know the tricks. When you do know the tricks, it's quite laughable. But at the time, you have to put yourself in the mindset of people at the time. It was all very new, all very exciting, all very different. If you don't know how a trick is done, you can be quite baffled by it, which is the whole idea. Knowing that despite our best efforts, so people from everyday citizens, curious citizens, to reporters, journalists, so on, to scientists, can be fooled by magic tricks. That's the whole idea of a good magic trick. Anyway, this comes to us from the Age newspaper, dated the 8th of December 1973, in a section called the Saturday Review. And there are, there are two pictures here, both of Uri Geller, looking very young, with a big shock of dark hair, and he appears to be holding a cooking ladle, or it's a knife, it says here. Okay, it says, Uri Geller, with a paper knife, he bent for reporter Silcock at London Airport. And the two pictures are before and after, so of course we don't see the bend in action. Is this man an illusionist, or does he have powers unknown to science? 2 weeks ago on BBC TV, Uri Geller, below, riveted Britain by his feats of psychokinesis. Reporter Brian Silcock remained sceptical until Geller bent his own key at London Airport without touching it. Is he, Silcock asks, an illusionist of prodigious talent, or does he have powers unknown to science? And by the way, bending keys and spoons and things without appearing to touch them is a standard part of the spoon bending repertoire. There is a delightful trick that I do sometimes where you place the spoon into your victim's hand and they hold the spoon tightly and you go, open your hand, and the spoon has bent magically. It's quite funny. So let's see what this report has to say. A group of children appeared on the Blue Peter TV show 2 weeks ago with spoons and forks which they had apparently bent by mind power. Another child with similar claims, 8-year-old Mark Shelley of Ipswich, acquired an agent, and the Daily Mirror sponsored a spoon-bending lunch at the London Hilton. Metal bending by mind power seemed to be rapidly turning into an eccentric brand of showbiz. For many, it would be a profound relief if it did, for it could then be ignored as just another stunt. Now, a quick look for Mark Shelley online. Comes up with the same reference I'm reading from at the moment, and something from the CIA. Declassified, in part, sanitized copy approved for release. Okay. Uri has a little competition, it says, in handwriting. How interesting. Oh, I see. Oh, wow, that's fascinating. We suddenly have a clipping here which has appeared from the National Enquirer dated January the 27th, 1974. And there he is. There's a photograph of the boy in question. And he is grinning at the camera, holding up a bent fork and a bent spoon. Oh, good for him. With the caption, "No trickery involved." That's great. I won't read it. It's not a long article, but we won't read that. But there it is. One for the archives. But I can't resist. I will read a paragraph from the article. Young Mark Shelley of Ipswich, England, saw Geller perform on TV last November. Quote, "It looks so easy," end quote, he said. Quote, "I decided to try it myself." I had just finished lunch at home and I sat with the fork in my hand and thought about bending it. I concentrated with all my might and stroked it like Uri Geller did. Suddenly, after 20 minutes, the fork slowly bent. I was so frightened I nearly dropped it. My friends and my mom, M-O-M, National Enquirer, didn't believe I could do it until I showed them, end quote. Oh, that's funny. That's great. Okay, let's get back to the other article. But the subject is far too important to be dematerialized in this way. If people really can bend metal by mind power, it will mean a revolution in science and our whole way of thinking about the world, more profound than anything since Newton turned the universe into a piece of clockwork 3 centuries ago. And since none of this happened, 52 years now, I think that gives us a big clue as to the veracity of the claims being made by people claiming to bend spoons. For it is difficult to see how the Geller effect, it is time it had a new name, can ever be incorporated into orthodox science. It violates too many basic principles. If some kind of field analogous to magnetism is involved, why does it pick on some objects and not others? Where does the energy come from? Why does it not die away at a distance? How can it be transmitted by radio or television? For some experiments last week seemed to work hundreds of miles away. And, Geller claims, experiments have shown that objects he bends actually lose mass. It is, in fact, a deadly heresy threatening the true faith of science, and because it is so subversive, the evidence must be examined in a spirit of almost fanatical criticism. Just how good is it? Last week in the Sunday Times, I described some experiments which changed my attitude to Uri Geller from extreme skepticism to almost total acceptance. I am still convinced he is genuine, but after thinking carefully about what happened, I am forced to admit to myself that some kind of trickery could have been possible in theory. And once again, we remind ourselves that if you don't know how a conjuring trick works, you can spend the rest of your life trying to work it out and not succeed. To recapitulate briefly, in a taxi on the way to London Airport, Geller bent the steel key in my office desk, apparently without touching it. It is too tough for me to bend with my bare hands, though somebody with very strong fingers might manage it. It is definitely still the same key, since it still opens my desk, and it is still bent. Trying to recall the sequence of events as precisely as possible, what happened was this. Geller examined the key, then passed it to Sunday Times photographer Brian Wharton, who held it between the palms of his hands. Geller held his hands over Wharton's for a few seconds and asked Brian Wharton whether he felt anything. He reported a slight sensation of warmth, then suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my God, I can feel something now." Later he described it to me as a kind of a slow pushing. Geller immediately said, "It's working!" And sure enough, the key turned out to be bent through an angle of about 10 degrees. And again, I just reiterate, that's a standard trick. It's a standard trick in the magic books. I have been able to think of 2 ways in which trickery might have been used. I am convinced neither was employed, but I could not prove it to anybody else. First, Geller might have distracted our attention when he first had the key, bent it, put it into Brian Wharton's hand, already bent, but how could he have done it without our noticing, since it would have required 2 hands and considerable effort, or some kind of tool? And could he really have counted on either of us not noticing that the key was bent in advance? Second, he might have substituted a similar key when first handed it, bent it, presumably with some sort of tool, while he was applying his power, and then, when Brian Wharton opened his hands, leaned forward to pick up the key there, a perfectly natural thing for him to do, and substituted mine again. But does he then carry pocketfuls of substitute keys, on any one of which he can lay his hands instantly, and does he run the most appalling risk of being exposed every time? Now, if you're thinking about this trick, think Occam's razor. Our next experiment involved telepathy. It is well known that professional magicians can give very convincing demonstrations of telepathy, which they do not pretend are due to psychic powers. But Geller did something I found very impressive. First, Before the key bending, I tried without success to transmit to him a shape I had drawn. I'll just stop here and comment on some psychology. Listen to what our reporter is saying. I tried without success to transmit to him a shape I had drawn. Isn't that interesting? He's putting the blame for a failed attempt on himself, and not the fact that it was not convenient for Geller to do the skullduggery required at that moment. So it's the failure of our reporter, not Geller. Interesting. After the key incident, Brian Wharton tried. He drew a circle with another wavy circle around it, while Geller turned away, hiding his eyes, and Geller then described it exactly. First, though, he said he would try to pass the shape on to me, so I made my mind blank. While Geller was concentrating, two shapes floated into my mind, an equilateral triangle and a square with a semicircle on one of its sides. I said nothing about them, but Geller, after describing Brian Wharton's circles, said, "Oh, I also got these," and proceeded to draw an equilateral triangle and a square with a triangle on one side of it. Since I never committed my shapes to paper, he could not have watched my arm or used any magician's tricks. But when we got to the airport, Brian Wharton bought a paper knife in the shape of a sword, which Geller proceeded to bend by stroking it while an airport employee held one end. He then took it himself and stroked it some more. It continued to bend. The blade could certainly be distorted by hand, but we have a whole series of pictures, two are shown here, to show that it bent gradually over a period of several minutes. Quite a crowd was watching. Did Geller repeatedly distract everybody's attention on each occasion, bending the blade a tiny bit more? He probably did. Now, that's the end of part one of this report into Uri Geller from 1973. It's quite lengthy, so next week we'll pick it up with part two. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. On next week's show, we have part two of Dr Eugenie Scott and the Scopes Monkey Trial, part two of Kat McLeod's interviews from Lilicon, and part two of the Trove article relating to Uri Geller. Thank you to the supporters, the people who support the show via PayPal or Patreon. Your support is vital. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hey, Kat.
Hey, Adrienne, how you doing?
I survived the Bermuda Triangle. How about you?
Well, I didn't get abducted up to the Galactic Federation, and nor did I get to meet Psychic Penny, but I'm doing good.
Excellent. Well, I have something really fun that I brought back from the Bermuda Triangle.
Is it an alien? Did you bring me Robert the doll?
Oh, that would be great.
Because you know he could be my boyfriend.
No, I did not bring you Robert the doll. And apparently Robert the doll is not as cursed as people like to believe, because the cruise went pretty darn well. All right, now, so a regular listener who actually met at PsyCon, brought Richard, myself, and you a gift. So the next time that I see you, I will bring you these. He had dice made, 3D printed. They're 6-sided, but they're very unique because they start at -1.
Oh, cool.
I know. Isn't that amazing?
Who's this regular listener that I can shout out a thank you to?
His name is Tom Craigle. And I hope I said that right, Tom, because I know you said bagel.
Well, Tom Craigle Bagel, thank you very kindly. That was very sweet of you.
It was really nice. It's such a fun thing.
Some year, I imagine I'll see Adrienne again and I will, get my set of dice or my die or whatever.
Yeah, sooner rather than later. And he gave us 2 each. And so what he said is we could do is roll them and play multiplication games and things like that. And then we could have negative numbers and positive numbers. But we're going to keep it simple today because I think that's too much for my brain today and maybe yours as well.
Definitely too much for my brain today.
So we're going to keep it simple. So our numbers are -1 up to 4. So -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right.
All right. So what do you want to guess for your first guess?
Oh, I got to go with -1 because I am the -1.
Well, then I guess I have to go for the positive one because I'm so positive.
Ooh. Only thing positive about me is my blood type.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
It's a 3.
Oh.
I wonder what Susan will guess. There's no 5.
No 5.
So, Susan, you'll have to let us know what your new favorite number is. So, next one?
Oh, I'll go for 0.
Ooh, I like 0.
That's how many live brain cells I currently have.
Well, I think I am going to go for 0 as well.
You just want to be a copycat.
You're right. I want to be like Kat and copy her.
Now watch it be a 4.
Oh, the dog's in. You might hear her going click, click, click. Here we go. It's a 2.
2.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
Okay, one more.
We're sucking at this game.
We're not doing very well at all. So what's your last guess going to be?
4.
Ooh, Jewel agrees. It's a 4.
Jewel knows I'm onto something.
I think so. I think Jewel guessed a 4 as well. I am going to go with -1 this time because I'm the -1. All right. Ready? 3. Maybe 3 needs to be the new Susan Gerbic number because good things and bad things happen in 3.
Obviously.
Obviously. And the supplemental or bonus round or whatever we call it.
I'm going for 3. I'm not as dumb as people think I am.
Maybe Tom made us a loaded die here. I don't know.
Did Tom make loaded die? Well, pick a different one.
Oh, I could.
Yeah, you could.
Okay, I picked a different one.
There you go. I'm sticking with 3, though.
You're I'm going to pick a 2.
Okay.
All right, here we go. 1. It's obvious that Psychic Penny is not playing.
So the winning numbers this week are 3, 2, 3, 1.
Thanks, Kat.
Thanks, Adrienne. It's lovely chatting with you again.
Yeah, we missed you. And I'm glad I didn't get lost in the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that somebody would get abducted or probed or something exciting, but...
We did lose Richard for a while, though.
It's true, we did.
Glad he's back.
Psychic Penny did step in.
Yeah, and so did you. Well, Jewel says bye, too.
Bye. We'll chat again soon.